Welcome back to Fast Market on the TD Ameritrade Network. I'm Tom White. I'm joined by my co-host Kevin Hinks, but let's bring in our next guest. That's going to be Andy Swan, the co-founder of LikeFolio.com. Thanks for joining us, Andy.
Yeah, it's great to be here as always.
Yeah, all right. We've got Salesforce.com. The earnings after the close, shares are up about 29% this year. They're off all-time highs. But this seems to be one of those stocks, even if they have a bad quarter or they reinvest in their business, there's a lot of momentum to this name just because of the business that they're in. Pandemic helped them quite a bit, but this has been one of the winners over the last 5 years in that cloud space.
Yeah, it's one of the, I really think it's one of the best companies in the world when you look at it all put together. And going into earnings, look, the last two earnings they've beat with the stock up slightly. Following those reports, they've delivered good revenue growth of plus 20% year over year in the last 5 quarters, which is pretty incredible given the economic environment. And so when we look at this from LikeFolio's perspective, we like to look at the number of people talking about using Salesforce. And that is indicative of people engaging with the platform, which is one of the keys to both user retention and bringing on new users. We see that up 22% year over year. So despite a real ramp up in 2020 based on some of the pandemic concerns and working from home and a lot of things that had to shift there, we're still seeing growth into this year, which is pretty rare. And so when you combine that with a overall user happiness rating, as far as LikeFolio is concerned, 84% positive, that's extremely high. So it tells me that Salesforce is doing a very good job with all of its integrations that it's doing of bringing people into the platform, making them happy over time, because it takes a little time for these new users to get happy. But once they're there, they stick, and they stick for a long time. And Salesforce just continues to build upon that base of recurring revenue. Really good business, and we expect just kind of the normal for Salesforce, which is a good report and generally a good Wall Street reaction.
Andy, the evolution of business, while you and Tom and I have been becoming adults and becoming older adults, me older than you guys, full disclosure, it's kind of one of those where businesses like to surround you with everything, right? Apple gives you everything electronic that you could ever think of. Microsoft is doing a good job of really creating ecosystems, right? That you everything you need will give to you. Salesforce continues to build their company like that with the, they keep bringing in new products like Slack in the last year and a half, 2 years. And is there anything that this company's missing? Or what's the best thing they do? What's the worst thing they do, in your opinion? Because it looks like it continues to get more popular. The Slack purchase was a little not very popular when it happened. It seems to be gaining more popularity as it goes on. What are they doing? Do they have anything else that they need to round this picture out? Or give us your views on that business trend in general.
Yeah, I actually think, Salesforce is one of those companies I think people in management will be studying for a long time to come. They have been very, very successful with the acquisitions that they've made and integrating them into a full user experience like you're talking about, Kevin. And, they're really into, education, collaboration, data integration, improving the user experience. And so, I could pontificate on what Salesforce needs next, but the truth is they're probably 3 or 5 years beyond that decision and looking what they're going to need next. That's how good this team is at executing. Sure. That's how good they are at integrating. I think as a shareholder of Salesforce, you really just have to kind of sit back and trust the execution of this team, because it has been second to none over the course of the last many years, and expect that to continue into the future. And I do think that from a LikeFolio data perspective, the integration of Slack has been very well received. And the way that Slack still functions as its own entity, we use it every day, as our primary communication source here here at LikeFolio, and no one even still at this point really knows that it's a Salesforce product. And so I do think that there's a lot of opportunity for the company to bring users like us into their larger fold over time, but they're very careful about the way they do it without upsetting the apple cart. And I think Wall Street end users are learning to respect that.
Yeah, Andy, and I think over the last 5 or 6 years, they're big into M&A activity, right? They buy a lot of companies, integrate them into the way that they do business. That creates this digital headquarters for a lot of companies. Now, according to your data, you guys saw a big ramp up during the pandemic. Do we see any cause for concern moving forward? As most of the companies that are on their platform are there, right? They've got that recurring subscriber revenue generation from them. What's their next growth story, or what kind of data are you seeing that's going to continue that momentum and the growth rate that they've had?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So while we do see that usage indication increasing 22% year over year, the one thing that does concern me a little bit is we see the number of people talking about establishing a relationship with Salesforce. In other words, purchase intent or getting involved for the very first time with this company down 21% year over year. So that tells me that there was some pull forward demand in 2020 as a result of the pandemic in terms of people adopting this platform. And maybe that rate of change has slowed a little bit. But compared to other companies like Zoom and others, minus 21% year over year is actually a pretty good showing. So I think Wall Street can take that with a grain of salt, but it will be interesting to see how the company talks about those growth prospects, because they're clearly doing a good job of retaining users and maximizing the revenue that they have from those clients. But how do they continue to add more and more to the bucket is a really good question moving forward. I'm sure it's top of executives' minds.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the CEO and Benioff, what he's done, he just spins that good story. And I think the next growth area for them, or one of the possible growth areas for them, is more acquisitions at this point, and then monetizing that. And you guys mentioned the Slack acquisition recently. Maybe they can monetize that to what the street's expecting. But always good stuff here. Hey, Andy, real quick, what kind of rating do you guys have from LikeFolio on this stock going into earnings?
Yeah, it's almost exactly like we've seen the last two times, slightly positive. Expect a good report. Expect that Wall Street expects a good report, and maybe we'll get a little bit of a move higher if they surprise us like they tend to normally do. So I think overall, we see no red flags going into this report.
Yeah, over the last 2 years, they've beaten EPS and revenue across the board 100%. So we'll see if they can continue that streak. All right, Andy, great stuff as always. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.